Now that E3 is properly dead, some are mourning, most are laughing. But a vacuum has formed, and the so-called summer of gaming is free to become the next big star. However, the players may change, but the game is always the same. We're always going to be congregating around people who think they're gods wishing to sell us lies. And seeing as they won't let tradition die, neither will I. Now, sure, there's a few games I want to talk about today, but since this is the first time we've seen such a large-scale return of staged press conferences, I thought I might as well also try and find who was the best host this year. They might just be here to sell us stuff, but hey, why not at least rate the performances? The first showcase was Sony. There were no presenters for this one, as it was an online presentation, so it easily gets to the top of the list for best performance. Spider-Man 2 was the main card they were laying down. Looked fine, even though I can guess half the plot already. You could say that Sony came out swinging, were it not for the fact that most of the rest of the lineup was boring as shit. Of all the multiplayer games they were announcing, the most questionable one was Foam Stars, which, of all things, seems to be a game trying to compete with Splatoon in the year of our Lord 2023. But since there are now 2 shooter franchises which follow this model, we've got to come up with a name for the subgenre. May I personally recommend Kuma Shooter. Though besides that, and the news of probably not the worst Konami PS2 remake coming to PlayStation in the next few years, Marathon was easily the most exciting thing from the state of play. Bungie are going back to a franchise they haven't touched since before Halo, and they're going to try and make a multiplayer game out of it. In the original game, the story was given to the player through various points around the levels that contained several paragraphs worth of exposition that would be dumped on you all at once. So, in a way, it's perfect for a Bungie live service. But the allusions to Destiny should be taken with a pinch of salt, since I don't think we're going to see a repeat of it taking Bungie several months for the live service to make the game fun. Because this is planned on being an extraction shooter, it's never going to be fun. On the opposite side of the coin, Xbox probably had the best showcase of the season, although that does not excuse the fact that the presenters sounded like they could have been replaced by a corporate mind map of the word gaming. While it isn't all that different from their previous presentation track record, they're getting put even further down in the list of performances because the person they got to host the extended Xbox showcase actually sounded like she was saying the words instead of AI generating them. But as for the games we saw, a surprising amount of Atlas games were shown off, including Metaphor ReFantazio, which is something new from the Persona team. It's got wacky environments, a trailer that asks a lot of odd philosophical questions that aren't necessarily answered, and a title that sounds like a load of cool European words were put in a blender. A whole new property, I promise you. Clockwork Revolution is another interesting mention, as it's like Bioshock Infinite if... For the 3rd year in a row, Starfield was up to bat. This year it got its own presentation, and Todd Howard was kept away from the camera for longer than I assumed he would, which is a shame actually. I love the sound of Fleetwood Mac. However, we now have a big old problem, because this looks really good. I'm actually kind of excited for Starfield. I really shouldn't be excited for a Bethesda game. This is worrying. But even if everything they've said turns out to be a load of bullshit, at least I believe the person who was talking about the ability to construct an entire cargo ship full of sandwiches. And indeed, they're the entire reason that I'm giving this performance an A tier. But all jokes aside, I think they could actually pull it off. I mean, don't get me wrong, it feels wrong to be praising a Bethesda game, but it feels like they're not making the mistakes of their previous... No, not the bag. Of all the studios I was curious about, I didn't think Ubisoft would be one of them, but alas, I had a surprising amount of hope going into the Ubisoft conference, given that all of their titles had already been announced in other people's much better presentations. But in their own presentation, they mainly had people talking over gameplay, describing things only as they came on screen. So I'm sure that a lot of the people who are presenting asked Ubisoft if they could make it an online video presentation.
And to my absolute surprise, Ubisoft said no.
As a result, the showcase felt slightly awkward, especially as many of the people they got to speak were either French or Quebecois, and so as a result spoke English as a second language, so props to them for at least trying. Although speaking of things where they're actually trying, some of the games look interesting, including a return to roots for some of their franchises, with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which looks like one of the best underrated titles for the 3DS. Though the most interesting announcement for me was not for a game at all, but instead for the Blood Dragon TV series, which is coming to Netflix. And from what I've heard described, I think I could get on board with this.
This show is many things. It's violent.
Hold this board.
It's a love story.
Look at the two of us. We could be like Beauty and the Beast. What do you say? Will you be my beast?
I can tell you it's the most philosophically conscious.
You look so superficial, you probably judge things by their physical appearance. Oh yeah? Your mom's so shallow, she probably thinks this quip is about her.
However, you've got to appreciate the balls on Ubisoft for allowing this to happen. Oh no, I'm not talking about them getting the show made. I'm more talking about the fact that they're calling this an
Anime series.
despite the fact it's made in fucking France. That is pretty damn ballsy.
I'm ballsy. I don't take no shit from anyone. I
Voll my cartoon an anime.
anywhere I want. I don't have to find a
Japanese studio.
like you.
Summer Games Fest was the centerpiece this year, and it felt surprisingly tight, even if Keighley can in one breath be introducing an anticipated game and the next be talking about fucking DoorDash. Now, this year the show started with Mortal Kombat, and because the fatalities are what they are, I cannot show the footage of Mortal Kombat, so I had to get my friends to reenact it. By the way, I did not tell them to do it shirtless, this is just how it turned out. Seeing as the Callisto Protocol was last year's show opener, I suppose it's no surprise that Mortal Kombat was doing it this year. After all, both were games that marketed themselves off their realistic gore effects before discreetly advertising some slightly fucked up pre-order bonuses. However, from the looks of things, Mortal Kombat is being really well received, and apparently the blood effects are really impressive and the fatalities are pretty interesting too.
Finish him.
Thank you. Oh, I hope that looks fucking good. Oh my, this is really bloody weird.
But Lies of P was another big presence of the Summer Games Fest presentation, and it looks to be Bloodborne with a plot that you can actually understand. Well, that's not the only difference from Bloodborne, as the setting is inspired by the Belle Epoque, which was a 19th century design movement mainly seen in France and Italy. This means that it ditches the London-inspired setting of Bloodborne, which I think was one of the most effective aspects of that game. After all, if it isn't set in London, what will be telling the player that they need to get the fuck out of there as soon as possible? Sandland is also coming out from Akira Toriyama. Speaking as someone who doesn't give a rat's ass about Dragon Ball, I actually look forward to this. The last time Toriyama worked on an original video game, it was Chrono Trigger, so it's not like the guy has a bad track record. And hey, Sandland looks to be pretty creative, even if its title sounds like the original name for the nation of Australia. John Carpenter's Toxic Commando asks the bold question, what if we made Transit into a whole-ass game? Which is all John Carpenter can really do after someone took the concept from his underperforming horror film and made it into a game that rakes in $80 million a year. However, I'm not going to shit-talk Toxic Commando, because who am I to question the work of a based Sonic Unleashed enjoyer? Though John Carpenter wasn't the most unexpected celebrity appearance. That was Nicolas fucking Cage. He was there to talk about Dead by Daylight, but the only thing I cared about was this.
And in that genre, there's a character, a murderous ghost named Sadako, who I think is amazing, and she made an appearance in this game, so that was good enough for me.
Nicolas Cage just revealed he has a waifu, and it's Sadako from The Ring. Just for that, he easily gets the award for Best Presenter this year. Now, I wanted to end this video by talking about Pragmata, because despite the only things we've seen from this game being delay announcements, I'm somehow really excited by it. I have no idea what they're cooking up, but something about the music and the vague moon setting is making me pretty excited about this. So I think I'm actually somewhat justified when I say the following. Whichever year this ends up releasing, it could be Game of the Year, if it allows us to mod the main characters into looking like any of the following bears. I know that this game will be one long escort mission, and I won't care if you allow me to turn their characters into one big Monogatari reference. And that's how you sell cosmetics, Capcom.